This is Linux in Laws, a podcast on topics around free and open source software, any associated contraband, communism, the revolution in general, and whatever else fancies your tickle. Please note that this and other episodes may contain strong language, offensive humor, and other certainly not politically correct language. You have been warned. Our parents insisted on this disclaimer. Happy, Mum? Thus, the content is not suitable for consumption in the workplace, especially when played back on a speaker in an open plan office or similar environments. Any minors under the age of 35, or any pets, including fluffy little killer bunnies, your trusted guide dog, unless on speed, and cute T-Rexes or other associated dinosaurs. Welcome to Linux in Laws, Season 2, Episode 10. Martin, how are things?
Yeah, can't complain. What about you?
Hunky-dory. Hunky-dory. Martin, what desktop are you using at the moment? Is it one of these kind of GNOME spins? As you normally do?
It depends which operating system I'm using at this specific time.
Are you using Windows? Exactly. Sorry, I completely forgot about this. There's only one
Windows,
desktop for Windows,
OS X, Ubuntu, Kali, you name it, I use it. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's your favorite desktop then on Ubuntu?
I'm not too fussed. I don't use
You're still running, what is it?
The desktop is just there to facilitate running other programs.
Yeah, you're still running 12.04, right? As in the latest LTS that you managed to check out. So
I think I'm up to 20 now. Yeah, something 20 or 4.
So you're running GNOME. You're not even running Unity anymore. Okay.
No.
But this is not a show about Unity or GNOME, but rather about KDE. And with that, I would like to welcome our guest, Joseph. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Joseph De Veaugh-Geiss, and I've been working with KDE for the past 2 years in a sustainability project called KDE Eco, which I'm happy to talk about much more, hopefully over the next hour.
Perfect. But just before we go into the details of this sustainability project, Joseph, why don't you give us a very short overview of what has happened over the last 50 years since KDE was first invented back in the late 70s? No, jokes given the fact that KDE...
I don't think he's that old, Chris. He can't remember that far back.
The concept of a joke is familiar to you? I'm just checking there, Martin. Just wondering there. Joseph, no jokes aside, given the fact that this is probably the most important desktop, apart from the other one, which cannot be named... Joseph, give us the rundown, please.
So just in a nutshell, KDE has been around since 1996, and we are just now about to celebrate our 27th anniversary. October 14th is the big day. And yeah, it's gone through many iterations. Right now, currently, it's KDE Plasma version number 5, which means there was, of course, version 1 through 4 before it. And we're currently in transition into KDE Plasma 6, which is now officially going to be released sometime in the first quarter of 2024. So yeah, that's a very, very brief history of KDE.
Yes, and the one thing that probably sets it apart from the other desktop is actually its cross-platform capabilities. Because the way I remember it, basically, it used something called Qt, also known as Qt.
Mm-hmm.
Qt?
Yeah, I know it is Qt, but yeah, Qt sounds very friendly.
And exactly, and this platform abstraction layer, for want of a better expression, has been ported also to macOS and Windows, and not just Linux, if memory serves correctly. So this is the reason why you see many native KDE applications using Qt, of course, on all of these three platforms, I suppose.
Yeah. Once you move beyond the desktop environment, the KDE application offerings are on all major operating systems and smartphones. So
and mobile too. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you know when this was ported first to Android or friends?
I don't. unfortunately.
Okay, fair
No,
enough.
sorry about that.
In that case, let's move on to the sustainability project. Maybe you can, before we go into the details, maybe you can chat also a little bit of history, because this is fairly new, if I'm not completely mistaken. This is fairly
So
new in the KDE ecosystem, right?
this is very new in the KDE ecosystem, and I would say it's not new conceptually in the free software communities. We just haven't thought of it in these terms. We're doing many sustainability things in our in the free software world that people don't think of as being sustainable and sustainably oriented actions. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that. But yeah, in KDE, it's started in 2021. It's a project. So the project that I started working for was called Blauer Engel für Forst, which is a project funded by the German Environment Agency, which is focused on spreading information related to the Blue Angel Eco label in free software development communities. And the interest in KDE started before that. Already in 2020, maybe 2019, at Academy, there were some discussions about energy consumption driven by software. But the project, the KDE Eco initiative, really sort of took off in 2021 and continues until today.
Academy is one of the community events that the KDE community runs, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So every year we have a week-long community event where people from all over the world come together. This year it was in Thessaloniki, Greece. And yeah, hundreds of contributors, whether they're developers or designers or just interested users, come. And yeah, we have talks for 2 days, workshops for 4 days, and then community events.
Can you say a little bit about yourself and how you ended up at the project as well?
Yeah, so my background, I'm actually a linguist by training. I finished my PhD in 2020, right before the pandemic lockdowns started. And I had already been considering at that time leaving academia. And during my PhD, I was doing a lot of experimental work, which requires software to do it. And I became more and more interested in the software licenses that were running the tools that we were using than perhaps some of the questions I was trying to answer by using them. So I decided that I wanted to pursue this passion for social issues related to digitization and free software. And I applied for several jobs and was very happy when I saw this particular position in the sustainability project because it brings together two of I think two of the most pressing issues facing our generation, which is all the things related to digitization and how that has shifted power dynamics and things like this, and sustainability issues and the climate crisis. So I've been working now in this project since 2021.
So that brings up a very interesting context, actually. You are doing this for a living, if I understand this now?
Yes. So I am.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So who's funding the whole thing? Because if I take a look at the project side, I see there also from a historical context, starting with Nokia, Trolltech, and some other contributors. But maybe now's the time to go into a bit more detail what the historical funding situation was and who's funding the project now.
So,
especially from this sustainability issue perspective. Sorry.
Yeah. So the Blaue Engel for Forst project was funded by the German Environment Agency, and we are currently awaiting news if we will get a second phase of funding starting next year. In the interim, I'm working at KDE both in the sustainability project and in more general community management and internal communications. So it's now kind of several things together, but the sustainability project itself was funded until March this year from the German Environment Agency. And we hope to get funding again to continue with the funded work.
Okay. I mean, in the past, if I'm not completely mistaken, individual companies such as Nokia and Trolltech, which that later became a different company name, or before it was actually acquired by Nokia, if I'm not completely mistaken, funded the project as such. But now I hear that this has slightly changed.
Yes. Yeah. So currently, we were funded by this external funding from the German government, and currently I'm funded by the EV, the nonprofit.
Okay. So there's a problem because KDE originated from Germany. You should probably add that.
Yes, of course.
KDE originated actually from Tübingen, which is a small village, not village, but rather town in southwest Germany. Probably known, if you've listened to this podcast for quite some time, you will probably know a formula called Tübix, a community event that is actually taking place in Tübingen itself, normally in July. And this is where the project started in 96, run by a guy called Matthias Ettrich, if I'm not completely mistaken.
Yes.
And exactly. And I think once the project became slightly more serious about funding the whole thing, bankrolling the whole thing, a proper association was set up, as in what is known in German as an eingetragener Verein, as in a registered association, which is used as a funnel, for want of a better expression, to finance and bankroll the whole operation from a legal perspective.
Exactly. Yes. And the nonprofit organization is based out of Berlin. It is important to add that the community is much more than just Germany and much more than just Europe. So the community is really representing the entire globe. But yes, the legal structure is based out of Berlin, Germany.
For the two listeners in the audience who don't know what KDE stands for, what's the abbreviation actually mean?
Currently, it just is KDE. It doesn't have any particular meaning. The original meaning was cool desktop environment. Cool spelled with a K, similar to the band Kool and the Gang. But currently it's just KDE. There's no particular meaning behind the acronym.
Not even recursion like KDE desktop environment or something like that. Okay.
And we're actually currently, because the BE for FOSS, the Blauer Engel for FOSS project, is no longer the Blauer Engel for FOSS project, but we still have the repository and still referred to as the BE for FOSS. We're now thinking of a new acronym in the history of KDE of redefining the acronyms that we use. So,
I mean, we should probably explain what a Blauer Engel, as in English, Blue Angel, means for the four people in the audience
who are not dodgy wine, or is that something else?
This is Blue Nun. Don't get
okay.
Martin, no, just take a look at the label tomorrow morning when you drink the stuff. It's not angel. It's actually nun, as in NUN. Very important.
I never drink the stuff that I'll explain. I just heard of the name before.
Another blatant
easily
lie.
Confused.
Anyway, you want to take this up, Joseph?
Sure. Yeah. So the Blue Angel is the world's oldest environmental label, which is backed by the German government. The award criteria for the various products that they certify are published by the German Environment Agency and are reviewed by a third party, the RAL, which checks for compliance with the criteria, and then it's issued by the BMUV. And don't ask me to tell you what that is in German because I don't remember, but it's related to the nature conservation, nuclear safety, and consumer protection agency of the German government. And the Blue Angel is most well known in Germany for toilet paper and other paper products. But they have many, many other products that they also certify. And as of 2020, that now includes software.
Which is fascinating, because if you're looking at toilet paper certification and next up is software, wow.
Yes.
It's a long way, I suppose.
Yeah, not many people know that toilet paper and software have at least something in common.
Interesting. So, Bundesministerium for Umweltschutz and Reaktorsicherheit, that was actually the
Yes.
German proper name. If you're listening, we would be more than happy to have you on the show, actually talking about the details behind the connection between toilet paper and software. The email address is, of course, feedback@linuxinlaws.eu. Okay, but on with the sustainability initiative, Joseph, if you are so inclined.
Sure. So I mentioned earlier that the free software community is already doing, and has been for the past 20 to 30 years, many things that are now recognized officially by the German government as being more sustainable. The Blue Angel award criteria does not require that you are releasing your software under a free software license, but if you are at an advantage for being eco-certified. And the reason for that is in the award criteria, they have many aspects which are related to user autonomy and the ways that user autonomy can influence the energy consumption needs of a software product, as well as the long-term use of hardware. So these are things that we take for granted, that you can completely uninstall an application, or that you can opt out, or maybe ideally you have to opt in if you want advertisements. But both of those are things that can influence the energy consumption profile of that software product. We also take it for granted that you can run, most people I know are using hardware much older than the official support lifecycle of the original vendors of the hardware. And these are other ways that free software is contributing to a sustainable digital society. So those are some of the aspects that are part of the Blue Angel award criteria that are one of the reasons why KDE, when looking at the award criteria, recognized a potential here for making sustainability part of the development process.
You already touched upon a very interesting aspect of sustainability, because sustainability for quite a few people actually means very diverse and different things. You already touched upon energy consumption, and you already touched upon, I'm almost tempted to say, older hardware.
Yes.
So maybe you can elaborate on these two things a little bit, because I reckon that a few people in the audience might have, I wouldn't say challenges, but may have a little bit of a difficulty connecting energy consumption and the writing of proper software to minimize that energy consumption going forward.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought up the fact that some people interpret sustainability in many ways, and I've had the situation where I've said that I'm working in sustainability at KDE, and the first thought was, oh, you're working on how to sustain the community in this sense, which I think many people are familiar with in the free software community, but actually we're talking about literally the environmental aspects of digitization, which are driven by software itself. And one of those is, for example, how much energy is consumed when performing a certain task. So the German Environment Agency published in 2018 a report in which they compared various software products in various domains. So web browsers, text editors, etc. And
interrupt before you move on to
yeah,
that.
Please.
When you say execute certain tasks and the energy consumption matters, what kind of tasks are we looking at here? Sort of very high level or detailed CPU instructions, or how are they generally defined?
So these are defined in terms of typical usage. So they're called standard
user and
user end user. Right. Exactly.
Right. Okay. Yep.
And in this one approach, they're looking at what they call standard usage scenarios, which are emulated tasks of an end user, which represent the typical usage of that particular software product. So if we're talking about word processors, that would be typing, enlarging the font, changing the page to be landscape, changing the font, making boldface text, things like this. And each of those actions is going to require the hardware to do some processing, and that then will consume energy. And this report looked at when doing the exact same tasks, which I believe were for 5 minutes, maybe 6 minutes of emulated user behavior. They found when comparing two word processors that one word processor consumed 4 times the energy compared to the other. They don't identify the products that they're testing, but they do identify the one that consumed 4 times as much energy as a proprietary word processor, and the other word processor in this study as an open source word processor. So in this study, they found a difference of 4 times the energy consumption. And on an individual basis, this might not be that significant, but you have to think, I'm sure, Chris and Martin, you both use word processors. I'm sure your family members use word processors. I'm sure your office mates use word processors. The students at the university use word processors. The agencies of the government use word processors. When you multiply this out and scale it up over billions of users, that 4 times as much energy consumption can really add up. So yeah, these are the kinds of things that we're talking about. We're talking about sustainability.
Is this stuff published somewhere as well, so you can see these results?
Yes, I can send you the link. It's okay. All publicly accessible. This particular report that I'm referring to is a report that's quite long, and it's in German, but they do have a several-page summary in English with some of this data. And I'd be happy to send it to you after the podcast interview.
Great. Yeah, we'll put them in the show notes.
Yeah. And I mean, this is a really large difference, but even small differences can add up. One example I use, which is based on a talk given by a software developer about just reducing the performance of a software product, reducing 1 CPU second from the requirements of that software. When you scale it up, and we're talking very reasonable numbers. I don't remember the exact details offhand, but millions of users, so relatively minor assumptions made, you can easily get to the energy consumption of small cities once you scale it up. So these are non-trivial effects that you're having when you're looking at making software more efficient, or if you're not doing such a good job at making your software efficient. These can have really big impacts on the environment.
Oh, that's very interesting, Joseph. Yes, but okay, standard tasks. But I reckon if you want to,
what about the cat videos? Yeah,
exactly. If you want to boil it down to a much more granular level, how do you go about this?
In terms of the measurement process, or in terms of?
I suppose that you don't go down to an individual CPU instruction level, because that would be overkill. But there must be some sort of gray between these black and white aspects, if you know what
Sure. I mean. I'm not sure I quite understand what direction you're...
Yeah, if you're talking about repetitive tasks like enlarging a font and all the rest of it, that would be the user's perspective, fair enough. But how do you actually kind of go to a more detailed level in terms of how much energy a piece of software actually consumes?
So okay, the way that the process currently works is you're correlating data from what task is done at what time, based on timestamps, and what the energy consumption is in the process that is recommended by the Blue Angel from an external power meter. And you just correlate those two, and to see which processes are consuming perhaps excessive amounts of energy or whatnot. Now it's the task of the software developer to go into the source code and find what is the what is driving that energy consumption, and can it be made more optimized or more efficient? But the actual data itself won't give you that information. So maybe that's the direction that you're going in here, and that's where the development process comes in, and where you have to then have a deeper understanding of what the software is doing, to take a look at and see if you can then identify ways that you can make that software more efficient. And there are, in the history of software development, optimization is a big topic, and that's sort of the flip side of efficiency, right? And so many of these things are already being discussed, perhaps in different ways. If you're thinking of the mobile environment, it's battery usage is going to be a big topic, and things like this. If you're talking about embedded environments, even more so, where you have a very limited computing environment and you have to optimize for that environment. We're talking about it here specifically in terms of the energy consumption aspects related to sustainability issues. Not sure if that goes in the direction that you were.
It does indeed. Actually, you just touched you just touched upon mobile. That is a very interesting area because, as we all know, battery. For one of what's what I'm looking for? Power consumption in terms of battery life and battery capacity. That's what I'm looking for. Both battery life and battery capacity are probably at the very top of any priority list of a mobile manufacturer, never mind the people using it. Needless to say, mobile environments have very different characteristics than your ordinary desktop or laptop environment. How does the sustainability measurement process address these differences, if you can speak to this?
Unfortunately, I can't speak to that specifically. That's a bit outside of my area of knowledge. I can say a little bit about some of the difficulties in the measurement process, but that's maybe in a different direction than.
Please do.
So the mobile environment is much more difficult to measure for many reasons. And currently, the Blue Angel is working on establishing criteria for how to eco-certify mobile apps and then the measurement process behind it. And I know that there's a lot of difficulty in, unlike a PC, which you can connect to a external power meter and just draw inferences from the data that comes from the power draw. From the computer. With a mobile environment, you have then all the influence of the battery and the difficulty in how you can then measure easily. Now, there are different approaches that I've tried to look at this. I believe one, in fact, is just removing the battery and trying to measure it. Others are having the battery at 100% and then running your tasks so that ideally any power draw is not coming from the battery. I don't know much about those details, but I do know that it's a different environment for measurement. And it's one that has come up because we at KDE have now set up a measurement lab. And there is interest in the Plasma Mobile teams in measuring smartphones. But yeah, we don't have the setup that would be needed for that right now. But it is something that at some point will be of interest. So, yeah.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, yeah, clearly efficiency of software and operations is the more clean your code is, or the more efficient your code is, the less energy it's going to use, right? If you do certain things, let's say in a better way or in a more less CPU cycles consuming way, then you're going to, by nature, also use less energy. So have you got as far as that conclusion that let's say the software that is built and designed to certain standards, if there even are, I mean, clearly people try to make their software as efficient as possible, but should there be like a more of a guideline or an activity to promote that design of software in the first place, right? Because I mean, looking at some of the projects that we use day in and day out, they are let's say put together with many different libraries, and most people don't even need to know all the details of those libraries anymore, because you just hook them together and it all works. But
I think you touch upon an interesting point, and this is one of the reasons that, or one of the motivations for having something like the Blue Angel for software, is that people develop to the hardware that's available, and hardware is becoming more and more powerful and can do more things, and so software is not necessarily designed to be the most efficient. It's designed to be to work on that machine. And because hardware has become so powerful, you can get away with a lot of inefficient coding. And this is one of the things that the Blue Angels directly addresses in their award criteria. And I have the quote handy because I like it so much. They remark that processing power has doubled about every 2 years since 1970. And this means that functions are processed twice as fast, and thus less energy is required for the same functions. A similar improvement in efficiency cannot be observed in the field of software. The availability of more and more powerful hardware has resulted in software becoming more and more bloated from version to version, so that more resources are required for only minimal or even no enhancement of the functionality. And when you look at the minimum system requirements of various applications, you can see this, that the software is just becoming more and more power hungry, but the hardware can meet the demands. So many users don't recognize it unless they try to run it on something that's a bit older. So I think developers are not always working to make the most efficient code, but rather to make the most performative code for the hardware that they have available to them. Which doesn't always necessarily translate to efficiency.
Yeah, not speaking to open source here, but you can see this in the let's say the commercial world, right? Where specifically in the mobile market, the software just becomes such a increase in heaviness or bloat, as you call it, so that people actually are forced to upgrade their hardware as well, because the old ones are not capable of running. We've seen all the increases in the size of the operating systems over time, right? It's
yes, and planned software obsolescence planned hardware obsolescence can be driven by software, and can be driven either intentionally by making the software not work on, or it can be just because that's the direction that the digital world is going, and that's. But this has very, very big environmental costs. I mean, there are various studies that look at the environmental impact in terms of CO2 and CO2 equivalent gas emissions, and the production, transportation, and end-of-life treatment of the device itself is often disproportionate in terms of its emissions compared to the usage. So we're talking numbers like 80% of the greenhouse gas emissions come from the production, transportation, and end-of-life treatment. Mm-hmm. This is so having this premature hardware obsolescence should be much more scandalous. I think it is.
It's more of a case for communism again, isn't it, really? People don't have the choice to buy new mobile phones because it's not good for the environment.
That's not the official KDE position. Just
fair enough.
I mean, Martin, you touch upon a very interesting point there, because this is the strategy of most mobile equipment makers, right? I mean, 2 years down the road, you are forced more or less to buy a new mobile phone, and either you recycle the whole thing, like donating it to a charity or something, or it just ends up in your drawer. I reckon I don't know how I don't want to know how many millions of unused smartphones are sitting in people's desks right now. On a global scale.
And the smartphone environment is also interesting because in many ways the hardware is tied to a certain software product. There are, without mentioning any names, I think you can figure out maybe who I'm thinking of right now, but there are smartphone producers that only allow you to boot their operating system, which is a bit different in the PC market, where you can perhaps upcycle a piece of hardware quite easily. But this linking a piece of hardware with a piece of software means that users are entirely dependent on the software developers for the use of that device, which is one of the ways that the user autonomy aspects of free software is more sustainable, because we separate the user autonomy from the vendor or from the developer. So this allows a user to then choose to continue to support a device as long as someone is there to continue developing it.
I mean, freedom of choice is one of the core principles behind open source, no?
Yes. And the freedom to use and improve software means that you can continue using devices much longer than perhaps the original software developers intended. I mean, or are able to support.
Going back to your original argument there, quite a few people that I know purposely use hardware that is 10 years old running your FLOSS operating system of choice, whether it's Debian, Ubuntu, whether it's CentOS, whether it's Fedora, because they just can, because they don't have to use the most recent hardware, because Linux and the corresponding distributions will run quite happily.
Yes.
On your legacy hardware. As a matter of fact, my home theater system is about 12 years old and still runs the latest LTS.
Yep. This is very common. It's interesting going to the Linux events, free software events, the variety and diversity of devices that you see in that environment, because people are running all kinds of things with all kinds of up-to-date software because they can. And there is an interesting question that comes up with that, though, which is the improvements in the hardware. Of course, you don't get when you're using those old devices. And there is a point at which retiring the old device will be more sustainable than continuing to use it because of its inefficiencies. But I think that point, now that's an empirical question that I don't know of anyone who's answered or given any sort of attempt to answer that question. But I think it's much, much longer than the average 5 years for a PC or 2 to 3 years for a smartphone. I mean, I think we're talking decades before that would become an issue. But it does raise that interesting question: is at which point do the inefficiencies of the older hardware make keeping it in use actually not desirable?
Is that something that you would look at as part of the project?
It's one thing I try to raise in pretty much every talk, hoping that someone will pick up on the topic and run with it. I mean, it might be. I have sort of looked at the data and thought, okay, I could try to do some back of the envelope calculations given some assumptions, but I'm actually not a researcher in this area, so I'm trying more to motivate the people who are to start thinking about it. But it is certainly relevant for the project, and if someone has some ways to start driving that conversation, we would be happy to push it in our community.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that you were funded by the German Environmental Agency to some degree, right? Do they have any kind of direction or say in what you guys do?
No. So I mean, we have a proposal for the project that now ended in March. And we had to fulfill certain aspects of that proposal. And before we had any major publications, we were supposed to check with them just to make sure that they were fine with that, since we were putting the German Environment Agency name on the funders for the project. But they didn't, beyond that, there was no direct influence on what we did. We had to fulfill the proposal, of course. And that was our main objective.
Absolutely. And with that, I can rest assured that my taxpayers' euros go to a very good cause. because I am paying taxes in Germany, so that's money well spent, I suppose. On the other side, Germany being Germany, have you applied uh, to similar agencies or at similar agencies in other countries? Because I reckon that should be a global cause, no?
Yes. So we have applied to a couple of European-based agencies. We haven't had success yet this year, but we're still applying. We are looking now at some North American-based agencies. There is a little bit of there might be tax-related or regulation-related issues that come up. I'm not sure how relevant that would be for potential funders, but yes, we are looking at it. So far, we focus on EU-based because we are based out of the EU.
I'm sure that quite a few fan groups in Mexico and some other kind of South American countries will be more than happy to help you for a cut in order to funnel the money through the right channels. I'm joking, of course. And this has been more than interesting, but before we wrap this up, what's the road ahead? With a special focus, of course, on sustainability, but also in general for KDE from an environmental perspective, if you can speak to this.
Yeah, so I can tell you about some of the things that we're currently working on, and maybe some of the we've submitted some proposals for funding that the ideas will probably be used at some point in some way. So right now we have a sustainable software goal. One of the three goals, which are sort of uniting the community to focus on certain things. Sustainability is there alongside accessibility and automating various internal processes. And as part of the sustainability goal, we have now set up a measurement lab for measuring KDE and other free software in a lab that was set up in KDAB here in Berlin. The lab is now, as of last month, thanks to the excellent contributions of a KDE contributor, Karanjot Singh, is now remotely accessible. So you can now integrate it into your CI/CD pipeline and get measurements of the software running a usage scenario. Entire process is automated. You get a report back, which can be used for either data-driven development decisions or for potentially eco-certifying the software if you're interested. So that's one of the big things that is right now quite fresh and needs to be tested. And we have a couple of different adjacent projects which are looking to measure their software, who are going to probably use that lab in the coming months and look into eco-certification. That's one of the big things. Other ones are things like integrating some of the sustainability information into the KDE software itself. So when you open up Ocular, for example, you can click on the About page and you get information about the license that it's released under, contributors, and then we are now adding an Eco tab so that users can get information related to sustainability. So things like the energy consumption when using that software, perhaps if it's not been eco-certified, then just a report that has been done for that particular software product, as well as some other sort of other sustainable aspects of the software, like uninstalling it or support for open standards. Things like this, which give users the ability to continue using that software far beyond what we intend as KDE, which gives also then the potential for continuing to use hardware for much longer. So we're including that now in our software. One of the ideas that we have for funding is to target demographics that are interested in sustainability issues, as well as things like organic food or other types of eco-friendly products, and actually going to markets and bringing hardware that is no longer supported by the vendors and demonstrating how free software can run on it. as a campaign to promote long-term use of hardware and reducing e-waste. This is one that I'm quite excited about because it's a very low-hanging fruit in the sustainability issues. E-waste, as we've talked about tonight, is a big contributor to environmental harm and is something that free software has already been able to deal with and address for decades. So I think we're in a really good position.
Yeah. Joseph, final call to action. How can people get involved if they choose to do so?
If you're interested in our particular project and the angles that we're taking on it, you can go to the KDE Eco website at eco.kde.org. And there you'll see a button that says Get Involved, and you can connect with our community in various channels. You can read our handbook. We wrote a handbook about why this issue is important and then how to eco-certify your software if you're interested. This is also available at our website. If you are in a different community, whatever that community is, and you're interested in this, there's all kinds of resources that we are publishing that you can use however you want. Take it. You can fork the remote access repository so that you can run your own lab. You can follow the handbook and set up a lab and start measuring the software in your community. So there's many ways to get involved with the topic, whether it's directly with us or within your own free software communities.
Links, of course, will be in the show notes. And with that, Joseph, that has been more than interesting. But before we close this off, let's do the boxes as in picks of the week. So, Joseph, what has come across your path in the last couple of weeks which you find worth mentioning?
So it's not directly related to sustainability, but I recently came across a book called Doppelganger. It just was released in September. The full title is Doppelganger: A Trip into the Mirror World by Naomi Klein. And it takes a look at the fractured political situation we're in and tries to understand how Naomi Klein can come to such different conclusions, although coming from a very different background, than her doppelganger, Naomi Wolf, who peddles in conspiracy theories and anti-vax sentiments and these kinds of things. And it's a really interesting perspective on where we are right now in the post-pandemic measures world politically. So I can. It's something I've been talking about with anyone who has met with me in the past couple of weeks. So I thought it would be my pox for this podcast.
Sounds very interesting because that, for some reason, that title remotely rings a bell. Just double checking, that doesn't involve alien abduction, right? So there are no aliens being abducted or people being abducted by aliens. Sorry, because I think I just read a review and alien abduction wasn't featured in that review. So I reckon I'm referring to that very same book that you just mentioned. So details, of course, will be in the show notes.
Yes, there is no alien abduction, although maybe some of the conspiracy theories go into that direction. Okay, there might be.
Good to know. Okay, Martin, over to you.
My box of the week is a movie called Minority Report, which I watched many years ago.
This is ancient, Martin.
It is ancient. I watched it many years ago, but I rewatched it earlier at the weekend, and I was still equally impressed by as I was last time. It's a great idea, and they should implement it today.
So how much were you able to recall from the first time seeing it? Just 5 minutes or more?
I don't know. I have the amount of minutes. No.
Second question: did you watch the director's cut where actually Mr. Cruise does get naked?
I didn't know there was a director's cut.
There is actually.
Okay.
Don't worry about this.
No, I'm not too worried about this. No, it's not really high on my list of priorities.
If you can't find this director's cut, people, on your Netflix or Disney Plus account, just try some decent BitTorrent search site. You may just come across this. Okay, with that, jokes aside, my box is also a movie actually called Tron. It's also ancient.
That's also ancient, even more ancient. Or are you talking about the remake?
No, I'm not. I think it goes back to the early 20th century. I think it was filmed in 1915 or something like that. No jokes aside, it was done in the 80s. And without giving too much away, it's a movie about a video game.
I think everybody's probably seen this movie. I wouldn't worry about it.
And how you actually can enter from the real world, how you can enter actually a video game. It's more or less a documentary on that subject. So of course links will be in the show notes. And needless to say, certain aspects of the artificial intelligence as a deep learning framework behind something called Linux and In-Laws has been closely modeled on Tron's master control program, also affectionately known as the MCP. But with that, Joseph, thank you much for being here and giving us an overview of the sustainability issues of the project. And looking forward to having you again on the show at some stage.
I look forward to it, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you, and thanks for listening. And this is the Linux In-Laws.
You come for the knowledge,
but stay for the madness.
Thank you for listening.
This podcast is licensed under the latest version of the Creative Commons license, type Attribution Share Alike. Credits for the intro music go to Blue Sea Roosters for their song Solid Market, to Twin Flames for their piece called The Flow, used for the segment intros, and finally to Celestial Ground for their song Sweet Justice, used by the Dark Side. You find these and other ditties licensed under CC at Jamendo, a website dedicated to liberate the music industry from choking copyright legislation and other crap concepts.